All right, guys. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the simpler, beautiful future of law, hosted by Lawctopus. We are very honored right now to have two very enterprising panelists with us, Advocate Aditya Srikanth and Harish Venkatesh. I'll come to their introductions in a bit, but before we start with the webinar, I just wanted to share with you guys as to why did Lawctopus decide on having this webinar in the first place. Earlier, when the team was considering, when the team was brainstorming and ideating that what should be the line on which we should develop our courses and what kind of webinars or conversations do we want to start within the legal community, we did a lot of brainstorming and we realized two main things. One was we want to do something so that we can bridge the gap that is left open due to the current legal education system. I mean, all of us know, most of that we have learned in law school prepares us only for 50% of what we actually do in practice when we go to our internships or when we actually start work. And we realized the reason for this is because we need to develop some interdisciplinary learning and some interdisciplinary skills. Okay. You think about any field and you add legal to before that, there's like a good opportunity over there. Think about technology, you have legal technology. Think about accounting, there's legal accounting. Process management, there's legal process management. So essentially, and design, of course, we have legal design. And these are all things without which a law firm or a legal practitioners in today's time will not be able to work, right? And the second thing that we realized is that there's a strong and growing dissatisfaction about the administration of justice that is happening, as well as the legal services that takes place. And the reason for this is a lot of us lawyers, we don't know and we are very disconnected from the reality, right? And the solution to do this is what we lawyers over here in the domestic legal community do is we wait to acquire a new skill unless and until it becomes indispensable for us to learn that skill so that we do not become irrelevant. But rather, we should try and be more innovative. We should be solution builders rather than people who are just waiting to give somebody a legal advice. And we should be the ones championing the cause of access to justice. And keeping that in mind, legal design and design thinking in law is something that gives us an insight into how can we possibly achieve this, right? And this is why we have two very enterprising people as our speakers today who are going to help us understand what legal design is and what design thinking means. So let me just introduce to you all Advocate Aditya Srikanth. Hi Srikanth. Hi Aditya. Thanks for being with us. So Aditya is a practicing advocate in the Madras High Court, and he's a legal design enthusiast. He's currently trying to build a community in the domestic space which talks and champions the cause of legal design and educate more and more people on this. And we also have with us Harish Venkatesh, who is the founder and creative director of Frozen Iris. It's a design solution company that's worked with a lot of brands that we know, Airtel, Yes Bank. Is that right, Harish? Jindal,
Yes.
to provide them creative design solutions. And we are really privileged to have both of them with us today to introduce us to the beautiful and the simpler future of law, which is legal and contract design. Thank you for coming and having this chat with us, Aditya and Harish. And over to you guys.
Fantastic intro, Mustafa.
Yes, thank you for talking us up. So we'll start today by just taking a look at what we're going to talk about today, which is the simpler, beautiful future of law with a focus on legal design and contract design. Now, some of you may have heard of the term legal design before, some of you may have never heard of it, and some of you may be familiar with it already. So just to begin, let's take a look at a definition of what law is and how I came across this concept of legal design. So to me, law is a set of rules and a system of rules that are created and enforced through governmental institutions or social institutions to regulate our conduct. Now, typically, simply because our society is so complex, we have so many laws. And when someone says law can be simple, that is something very, very, contradictory to what we think law normally. But that is something which I came to realize that as I work with more and more businesses, they don't want a complicated solution. They want a simple solution which is just right for their particular use case. So this led me to think about what could be the future of law. And when I was thinking about the future of law, I thought like, okay, is it possible for the future of law to be more beautiful? And when I say beautiful, I don't mean visual beauty. I just mean it could be in a simple sense that the words that we use in a contract are the right words, or the visuals that we use in a contract or could use in a contract are the right visuals. So how do we use beauty in law? I think that's where design would step in. And a lot of people have said attractive things work better. No, it's not everyone. It's the father of user experience, Don Norman, who said this. And I think we would all agree that we want a better future, and a more attractive future. And that is where I think design would be helpful to make a more beautiful future of law. And Harish will now give us a brief intro about what is design and what is design thinking in specific.
Thank you. Thank you for intro, Adi. Yeah. So for the participants who are there in the call, if you have any questions or if you want me to go slow, in any of my discussion, just drop in a chat. Maybe Mustafa, if you are monitoring the chat, just give me a heads up in case if I have to stop somewhere. Okay, right. Thank you, Adi. That was a clean intro. Yeah. So this entire concept of legal design that we are going to discuss in this next 1 hour session is something that me and Adi came across very recently in the last 6 to 8 months, and we really wanted to share this with this new set of aspiring participants who are there in this call. Yeah. So when we started discussing this concept of future of law, we have. So I have a certain exposure to what law is, and Aditya definitely has more exposure and understanding of what law is. But when he approached us as a design studio in understanding how is it that we can take it forward, we said, let's first go back to design and see what exactly design is. And I really want to go through that process with all of you over here. And what Aditya has been doing in his profession is, in the bottom, if you see, there are 3 circles. One, he has been dealing with contracts, litigation, disputes, and he has been talking to companies and helping them with all this contractual stuff. And design now, when we introduce the word beautiful, is positioned centered in between the process. It is not positioned after the business, or it is not positioned before the origin of contracts. It is positioned in between this chain primarily for a particular reason. Now let's go and talk what exactly design is to all of us. So I myself, I started my career as an engineer, and then I transitioned myself to a designer. So what exactly design means to all of us, like a common man. So a couple of the images that we see on the screen is something that we all relate to. A design, can be a painting or a portrait that's kept in a museum, or something in the fashion industry, which can be a dress, or something that we all associate to a very aspiring brand like Apple, Nike, Samsung, Microsoft, or an interior design or a fashion car or a supermodel car, whatever, right? So this is what design as a common man that we perceive around us, right? But if we actually stop for a moment and realize everything that's around us, right? Say even this pen, to the coffee cup, to the laptop that we are using for discussion now, all of this has been designed. All of these are man-made objects. These are all designed for a certain purpose, right? So this is one realization that brought me into this field of design, and that is going to be a very fundamental topic of discussion in the concept of legal design now, right? So there is one definition of design I would like to introduce to everyone over here. So this is something that caught my eye back in like 6-8 years back when I was first exposed to the concept of design. The definition goes like this. Design is to design a design to produce a design. Right? I'll repeat it again. Design is to design a design to produce a design. So what does the sentence actually mean? So design as a word, it has been colloquially or locally used in a lot of different contexts, but the word can have multiple meanings on where and how it is going to be positioned, right? So the first word design that we are talking about is a noun, a general concept of what design is. Design is to design a design, right? So the second usage of design is a verb, an action or an activity. Design is to design a design, to produce a design. The final design that we are talking about is the outcome, the objective of what we want to achieve. Say the pen or the coffee cup or the laptop or the laptop charger, whatever. That is the outcome that we are talking about. While the first word design is a general concept, right? In between, there are two design. One is the activity, and number two is the plan or an intention through which you will achieve the final outcome, right? So all of these words have this, all of these, activity or actions have the same word design associated to it, right? So the thing that we saw in the previous slide, all of these are directly outcomes that we all easily associate to in the world that we interact with. But all of this has been designed by someone to be used by someone for a specific intent, right? And that is achieved through a process, right? And that process is what we are going to talk today majorly, which is the design thinking, right? Uh, how many of you in the audience have heard about the word design thinking? Can we have a hands up, a raise hand is the feature over here?
No, Harish, instead what I'll do is I'll launch a
Yeah.
poll right now
Okay,
to gauge what is the level of understanding about this concept.
perfect. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
guys, so all the attendees, we are going to be launching a poll right now. Please do put in your responses over there.
Let me quickly go to the next slide then. Design thinking is for designers. How many of you know about design, or how many of you believe design thinking is for designers?
So Harish, I have results for the polls coming in as we see,
Yeah.
and more than 80% of the people have heard this for the first time, heard this expression for the first time.
Okay.
And also, guys, this is Tanuj this side. If you want, you can send in your responses to Harish's question over the chat box. Please choose all attendees and panelists as the option so that your peers can also, get your responses. So please use the chat box to, send in your responses to Harish's questions.
Right.
Yeah.
I would like to know the audience, understanding over here. Primarily, this will help me, limit myself up to what level of detail I want to go on this, or where should I stop, right? Have we got majority answers in?
Yeah, Harish, we have. And this is more with respect to legal design. So I believe it's safe for us to assume that
Yeah.
the audience is new to this entire concept and we can, move forward with that premise.
Right. So there is a general notion that design thinking is for designers, through which designers create the magic, that we get to interact in the world. But that's not actually true. Design thinking is not something that is made specifically for designers, but rather design thinking is a set of heuristics. Design thinking is a set of heuristics for guiding team-based collaboration for a certain objective, right? So design thinking is a process or a framework for guiding team-based collaboration. This is not limited to only designers, but it is for every one of us who is answering, who is in this call, who has answered the poll, and anyone out there. If one follows the process of design thinking, you will be able to create a certain outcome for a certain objective. That is what design thinking is all about, right? I'll go to the next slide. So you have said that the majority of the audience over here has not came across the word design thinking, which is fine. So design thinking is not actually an age-old process that's been invented by any a Roman king or a pope or sometime back in AC, AD or BCs. Right? Design thinking is a very, very new concept by a design and scholar called Richard Buchanan. It's a very new concept that was introduced in 1992 through a research paper that he published. So he said, design thinking for wicked problems. That's the title of the paper that was published in 1992, in which the concept of design thinking was introduced first, right? And you can see a lot of organizations, a lot of innovators, entrepreneurs are using the concept of design thinking in the last 8 years or 10 years, we can say from 2000 or 2004, 5, this has been very actively picking up. And even in India, very proactively large scale enterprises are practicing this in a very big scale. Now in this slide, there is something very, very interesting for all of us to notice, or something that's very new to me initially, the word wicked problems. So we all know problems, we all know defined problem statements, blah, blah, blah. But what exactly wicked problems means, right? Um, Wicked problems refers to those problems which does not have a binary answer to it, right? Hey, do you need a coffee? The answer can be binary. I want or I don't want, right? But there are a lot of problems out there, even in the legal space, that all of us, address on a daily basis, for which the answers are not exactly binary, right? Say for starting from something like a poster design, or a problem of you losing your key, or a problem where you are unable to find your switch at night. As simple problems as these, it can scale to global issues like climate change, sorry for that, yeah, natural hazards, pandemic influenza, which all of us are facing now, digital addiction, to social injustice. So all of these are wicked problems because the solution to this is not binary. There are so many factors associated to this problem statement, and so many factors need to be considered before we zero on a particular solution for it. That's what makes a problem a wicked problem, right? That is something very essential for all of us to understand what kind of problems can be tackled through the concept of design thinking, right? I'll go to this slide. So this slide, I'm going to spend some time on this primarily to help you understand what exactly the concept of design thinking means. Design thinking is a 5-step process starting from empathize to test, where the 6th step, or post design thinking step you can say, is the implementation of whatever is the output that you get out of this, right? You can break it into 3 steps. The one, understanding; number 2, exploration; number 3, materializing something, right? The first step, understanding, has 2 things to it: empathize and define. Let's go step by step, right? So if we go back to the definition of the design that we saw, we said we want to design a design to produce a design, right? So the final output that we are talking about is to be used by someone. Say this pen is being designed for me. It is not designed for a blind person, or it is not designed for someone who is having a Parkinson's disease. It is designed for a common man for a specific purpose. So you have a very specific target audience to design this. What does this, the first step, empathize, refers to is, as someone who is leading the design thinking process, you have to empathize with your audience and understanding what the problems of the audience are. That is your first step. So there are multiple ways in which you get to empathize with your audience. So we all have heard this term, like where they say you need to step into the shoes of your audience. That's precisely what this means. It can be done through a lot of ways. You do a qualitative survey, you do a quantitative survey, or you simply go and sit with your audience and observe them for 10, 20 days to understand how they are reacting to certain things, what their problems are. Or you do an interview with them and try to understand how they are reacting to something. This can be something similar to what in marketing people do as market research. They go and understand certain things from their audience for a certain objective. In design, we go and empathize with the audience to identify what are all the problems they are facing and what are all the issues linked to the problem. That is your step 1, which is empathizing. That is a half step of understanding. Then the second stage, which is define, you define your top 5 or top 3 problem statements from based on your entire analysis. Say you spend 10 days, 20 days in empathizing with your audience and trying to understand what their problems are. The next step, you define, you distill down, these are all the top challenges faced by them, or these are all the top 3 problem areas that they want to address for them. Because they might have a lot of issues which we might not be able to solve. So you will be able to distill down what is the top thing that I'm going to solve. So once you have the brief or the problem statements ready, this is where the team collaboration starts. Now you go and present these problem statements to your team, where you and your team together can ideate on coming up with solutions. Without any limitation, can you come with thousands of solutions? Can you come with 10,000s of solutions? It can be as crazy as possible, but the objective is to come up with a wide variety of solutions. And now what you do at the end of the solution, the ideation phase, is to compare your solution with what your problem statements are. How appropriate are your solution fitting into your problem statements? Then you converge all your solutions to a top 5 or 10 or 3, depending on what is the timeline and the budget you want to follow. Then you enter in a phase that is called prototype, right? So all of us have ideas. We want to implement all of these ideas, but the implementation might be time taking, or it can be costly, or it can be at a very large scale that all of us might not be able to do. So prototype refers to a stage where you will have to do this jugaad way of thinking, or the frugal innovation, where you try to come up with a low cost implementation, or come up with a low cost working model, or come up with a presentation, some form in which you will be able to convey your idea or convey your solution and get a feedback from your audience. That is what the prototype step means. Whether you can make a wireframe, or you can make a clay model of the pen, or you can make a a rough paper sketch and show it to your audience and get a feedback on. A prototype can be on different levels. A low fidelity or high fidelity is what we call as. Once you have the prototypes ready, the important step is to go and present it to your audience and see how well they are reacting to it. Reacting and how well it is actually impacting your problem statements. You can have a wide variety of problem statements. So based on it, you need to understand, is it creating a difference? Is it creating an impact? Or your audience relating to it? Where exactly? So you need to collate all the feedbacks and put it back in your previous step prototype, take it back to ideation, take it back to define, take it back to empathize. And then you start this process again. So once you do a test, you will get to know how your solution is actually, benchmarking against your problem statement. Then you go back to empathize, understand what went good, what went wrong. You iterate the process. And once you have a defined solution in your place, then you go ahead and implement it, right? So design by virtue of it is something that is very subjective. There is no absolute answer to how a coffee mug can be. We go to a shop, we find thousands of coffee mugs out there, and everyone will choose variety of things because it is extremely subjective. What this design thinking process helps us do is, it helps us narrow down our solutions towards the most absolute answer. We might be able to or never be able to reach the absolute answer, but by following the design thinking cycle from empathize to implement, we will move one step closer to your absolute solution. That is what this process does, right? Do we have any questions on this over here? Can I move ahead to next slide?
Yeah, Harish. So a lot of people want to really understand why design thinking is relevant in law.
Right.
And yeah, we'll come to that. I've already told them, but I think this is great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Harish.
Right. So the word design thinking in the design space and also with respect to organizations, it has been related to certain keywords like utility, making things better, usability, human centric, services, ease of use, meaningful. iPhone is something that all of us have interacted with and changed the way how design have been perceived, right? iPhone is something that made things better. It made more utilitarian. It brought in the concept of human centric. It created a new service or an experience of how people use something, right? And it is an output of design thinking exercise, we can say, right? This design thinking practice has been actually used or being used in variety of sectors, including education, organizations, government, engineering, management techniques, and even in healthcare these days. If you just Google, design thinking success stories, you will see thousands of 10,000 success stories already implemented in a global scale, including for problems like pollution. That is the power of design thinking when done in a very large scale, right? So I think through this exercise, through whatever we saw till now, I believe all of you are in agreement, with this. Innovation is not a magical process. It is not something that, radically occurs to someone by sitting in a room all day alone, or how people imagine creative persons to be, right? Innovation is not a magical process, though it can be. It is something that professionals can be trained in, and design thinking offers the guidance to do so. So every one of us who is there in the call are eligible to call yourself a designer if you are able to follow this process. Because what you are doing, you are going through a process to create a certain output for a specific intent. That is what the definition of design goes as, right? So a designer is not someone who we think of, in a certain form or in a certain shape. Everyone can be designers. Everyone has the ability to create something, and hence everyone can be, right? So when Aditya came to us, with this question of future of law, how is it that we can actually rethink in all of these things? We went back to this question of design and what design actually did to me personally. And then going through this concept of design thinking, we immediately went to Google and saw what exactly is available. And then we came across this term legal design. this has already been in practice for quite some few years, and it is in a little bit nascent stage. Though in European countries, it's been practiced big time and it's being applied big time. You can go on Google and a lot of things, a lot of materials are out there. Then we said we'll dig deep and understand what exactly the concept of legal design is. So legal design is something that merges three disciplines: design, law, and technology. Design is to make things people can use and want to use with a desire to it. Law to promote a fair and just society and to empower people. And technology, obviously, to increase the effectiveness of people's action. Right? So Anna Postumus is someone that we look forward to really, because she has been a pioneer in bringing up this conversation of legal design in the global space. So Anna defines legal design as a new discipline that combines legal expertise, information design, and design thinking. Right? Margaret Hagan, who is the director of Legal Design Lab, Stanford Law School. So Stanford Law School was the first one who actually came up with this concept of legal design, if I'm not wrong. So Margaret, who is the director over there, she says legal design is the application of human-centered design to the world of law. Right? Human-centered design, because law is being designed for humans to use, right? So a human-centered approach to the world of law to make legal systems and services more human-centric, usable, and satisfying. One last definition, which I really want to cover. Legal design is a mindset as much as a discipline. It is a practice for sure, but it is also a mindset on how we approach legal. How we approach legalese, or the concept of legal. It means starting with the end user of legal service of all kinds and working backwards. So you identify who you are, coming up with the legal solution for, and trying to understand their requirements, and then backtracking from there, right? So this legal design is now actually a field by itself, where it has certain goals and objectives associated to it. I think Adi would be better to take from here. You're on mute. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Harish, for everyone about what design thinking is. And now I think someone in the audience also raised a question on how design thinking is relevant to law. So Harish has defined legal design as a mindset in which you use to create better services for people who are accessing the justice system. Now, using this, I would say that there are a few broad goals that you can use this mindset or these glasses to help you achieve some broad goals. One would be to make it very easy for non-lawyers to understand law. And, the whole system right now is very difficult. If I'm a person who is not a lawyer, it is very hard for me to navigate the court system or figure out how to get a case filed or anything for that matter. And this ties in with the second goal, which is to create a better front end and a better back end system for law. So by a better front end, I mean more accessible courts, courts that are easy for people to reach. And this is facilitated by a back end, which is again designed in such a way that it just makes it easy and seamless for any member or stakeholder of the justice system to get the end result, which is justice. And thirdly, it is about using incremental and step-by-step processes to create innovation. Now, we'll take a look at what are the areas of focus for legal design. And over here, we can see first, which is what I touched upon, is how do we make the legal system more navigable? Like, how do we make it easier for a person who has never come to a court before to figure out what is going to happen to his case? What are the steps involved? For just as a basic example, how do we make people feel that they are supported? Right now, a lot of people would feel that they're not getting enough communication or encouragement from the stakeholders in the system that their case is going to be taken care of. I never know if today's case is going to be heard or if it is just going to be an adjournment for various reasons. So there has to be, how do you make them feel more comfortable? Second question. Thirdly, how do we encourage legal health in people's everyday life? So this could be from telling people why they should not skip a signal to why they should not drink and drive, or why they should not encourage bribery, and a lot of simple things. how do we create data-driven smart tools to help people make wiser decisions? So how do we use big data that is available in the court system to create better systems in a sense? And finally, how do we put all these things together and create a seamless user journey for those who want to come to the legal service system? So I think broadly we can say that the legal design is all about empowering people who are not lawyers. Like we as lawyers or law students are empowered, okay? And because we understand how law works, because we spend a lot of time working on it and studying it. But people who don't want, who do not study the law have no clue what's going to happen. And this is where legal design, I think, is going to be a very big player in the access to justice space. So let's take a look at where all we can apply legal design, and we'll start at the very basic level. So this is actually a very common flowchart in the design field. It can be applied in any industry. You can take it and you can change it similarly. So in the legal industry, if you're looking at system design, you're looking at how do we change the system in such a way that it is easier for people to access the system. This could be in the form of virtual courts, which is a new innovation. And when you're designing a system also, you make the people in power have to use this mindset and create a system that first looks at, do we have internet availability in all lower courts, and how do we do this, etc. Second, we look at organization design, which could be how do we make better organizations that suit people's justice. And in terms of service design, we talk about how better lawyers to our clients, and how do we redo our work to facilitate the success of our client. And third would be, the next step would be like how do you design better products, and that allow people to get their end result in a quick manner. And finally, the topic of today's webinar, which is how do we create better information products, like contracts. And so I think this could be very well the future of law. We have to use design and create contracts that are simpler. Now, I'm sure all of you are thinking, how is this relevant to a lawyer? How can I, a person who has no legal background, use law and use design? And I was there. And only recently I have been working with Harish in redoing some work. So anyway, me and Harish met in 2017, and I was fairly fresh out of law school that time. And I worked with Harish to create an agreement for his company. And that was a master service agreement to facilitate, for which he can use with all of his clients. So in 2019, sometime in the last 6 months, he reached out to me and he told me that, hey, like, why don't we make this better? And we were just talking and we thought, okay, let's redo this contract. It's been about 2 years, and let's take these learnings of a simpler law and of a new mindset, and let's try to apply this to the contract and make it simpler. And we identified a few pain points that arose because this contract was in use for 2 years. And the biggest pain point was, by the time a contract is sent down to the other party, and they go to another lawyer, and they get that lawyer to review this agreement, redline the agreement, send it back to me, and I have to redline it again, and only then the contract is going to be signed. But if you think about reality, people have, Harish had already talked to these clients and told them, like, look, this is the commercials, this is what we're going to do. So in principle, there is already an agreement between these parties. And it is because of the complicated legal agreement that the whole contract process got delayed. And Harish and the other party had a lot of difficulties in understanding the agreement. Nobody could understand it because it was written by me to be reviewed by other lawyers and not by people like Harish. So, and also there was another problem, which was a lack of process of understanding the process, which that parties would not know who has to sign the agreement. I'm a sole proprietorship. Who's supposed to sign it? I'm a company. How do I get it signed? Then how do I execute the contract? Can I send it by mail? So these were common questions and pain points that we identified. So we decided to use a new mindset, and there is a design agency called Dot. They're based out of Finland, and they have made this very interesting flowchart on how basically an anatomy of a legal design document. And they tell us that, you know, for doing an effective legal design, you need to combine graphic design, you need to combine legal expertise, you need to combine service design aspects, and you need to put all of these together to create a new kind of a document. So for me also personally, it was very challenging because I have never done something like this before. And it was very fun, in fact, because we had a designer coming in to tell us that, look, I can't even read this. I don't understand head and tail of this. Can we do this in a different way? So I had to apply my legal expertise to figure out what are the, you know, portions of the contract that are absolutely essential for this use case. What portions of the contract can be eliminated? And we had a lot of back and forth, and it was very collaborative process, which allowed us to use legal design. So how do we use legal design? How does legal design use design principles? So first we look at what is the legal challenge that we are trying to solve, and whether we are going to solve this as an individual, that is myself as a lawyer, or as a team. And I would recommend that if any of you are going to try this, definitely do it as a team, because you will get a lot of ideas from people from just completely different walks of life from you. I mean, we have a lawyer training. We are taught to think like, what is going to happen if this agreement goes before a judge? But we need to also think about the risk, you know, which is, I mean, how many contracts are actually litigated? Very few. I mean, these are all risks that you have to weigh with your client, and it's an amazing opportunity to sit down with your client and really find out what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you need to approach the problem using legal design. As Harish said, the mindset is very important here. So here, our mindset would be to, the mindset would differ from case to case. If your goal is to reduce contracting time between the parties, you need to approach the problem with an angle of simplification and, you know, better communication. So it really depends case to case. So we will then combine all these disciplines, that which is legal expertise, to create the content which is actually required. And for design research, you know, we need to figure out what are the key aspects of the legal product, who is the stakeholder in this particular case, and we need to understand what is the user's need. For example, if you're having a multi-billion contract, then definitely you need to have a complicated agreement. But if you're working with small and medium businesses, which you might in the initial days of your practice, you need to think about how complicated the agreement needs to be while still covering the rights and responsibilities of both the parties. And then we need to approach this problem and create a product for this particular for the particular problem. And we use graphic design to create visuals that make it easier for the end user to understand. And finally, if this is going to go online, we need to figure out how to create a website. And this might not be very relevant in a contract scenario, but if you want your contract to be living online through some automation platforms, this is also a significant question. So the end of all this made me think that legal design is nothing but using design thinking in law. And in the next slide, we'll see how legal design thinking works. And
Aditya, one line I would like to intervene here.
Yes, please.
So Mustafa said initially, you know, there is a certain objective to why Lawctopus is actually doing this. So times are changing. What you know is demanded from a designer and what is demanded from a lawyer can be completely at this point in time, right? So what this concept of legal design or this slide in specific is bringing out to you, or I want to stress again, is there are a lot of areas that one, even as a designer or as one as a lawyer, that we are in requirement to expose us towards, right? Which is the interdisciplinarity. So one should know the legal expertise, the design research part of it, the service design of it, the product design, graphic design, and web design. So this doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a master of everything, but the multidisciplinarity or the importance of interdisciplinarity on this has to be brought in everyone's practice. It can either be through yourself immersing yourself in multiple arenas, or it can be through, you know, a brilliant collaboration where you get to do with people, you know, or between companies. And this will pave the way for a lot of, you know, new innovations in the way you perceive things or you interpret things. Thank you, Adi. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a very worthwhile interjection. um, yeah, as Harish said, I think it's very important to be collaborative with people. And I think, especially in your first few projects, it makes a lot of sense to work with the designers, especially because they will bring a completely different aspect. And yeah, so we use in legal design thinking, we combine visual thinking, which is figuring out the relationships between a complex scenario and figuring out how you can visualize this. We will come to some examples of this later in our webinar, so please be patient. Then we have to use design thinking to figure out what are the processes that we have to apply in this, and that could be design thinking and visual thinking and user experience design and legal thinking, which is basically understanding the context and needs of the people and interacting with law and being able to apply improvements based on these insights to make justice more accessible to everyone. So basically what I'm trying to say is legal design thinking is nothing but design thinking with the word law in front of it and approaching the whole problem with a legal background, which is where you as lawyers or law students would step in, and you would take the conversation from how do we make this as a legally binding agreement to how do we make this as a legally binding agreement that is also collaborative and easier for everyone to understand. And definitely you would have to empathize with your clients, you would have to define the problem, you'd have to ideate a few prototypes or solutions, and finally you would have to test this with other parties or your clients or other stakeholders. And it's a constant process of improving the contract over and over, and in fact it's more work for us than normal. So let's go to the next slide where we talk about how we would do this normally. So when we would normally work, which is our usual way of working, is where we would get a mail from the client and he would tell us like, hey, I need a contract for this scenario. Can you please ready it? So we would basically ready the contract. We would just ask him basic details like what is your liabilities, and we would try to get a few inputs from the client. That too, this would usually be by email or by 1 or 2 phone calls at the most. Then we would have precedents or previous documents that we would refer, and we would create the agreement again without collaboration, and we would figure out any again, and then we would send out the agreement to the client, and it's the client's headache to figure out how he's going to use it after that. Sometimes the client would request us to print it out and send it to him, and we do that, but sometimes we don't. Then how do we do this in a new mindset, based on what we've been talking about the whole time now? First we would completely put away our precedents, and we would first try to understand very deeply what is the problem that the client wants us to solve and what is the solution for that particular problem. Then we would just brainstorm ideas which may be completely relevant or irrelevant, but the idea here is to get out all your thoughts and figure out what all solutions might be possible, even if they're completely something unheard of or something that you've not done before. Then based on these previous discussions, you would make a prototype along with your legal expertise, and then you would test this on previous clients, or you would test it with the employees of that firm to figure out if they can understand the contract that they're going to deal with. Because one thing we have to keep in mind is when you're designing a contract for a business, the business person who's going to be using the contract, who might be a sales executive or a business development executive, might not know what are the exact legalities of that contract. He might not understand the legalese. So we need to test these with the end user to figure out if they can understand it. And then we finally go to presenting and implementing this solution. So, I mean, I think I've given you an overview of how this works, but again, why should you care about this, right? Why should we as lawyers care about legal design? So I think as lawyers, one of our main job is to communicate our ideas to our clients. If you're a litigator, you are communicating your client's case to the judge. If you're a transactional attorney, you are creating agreements to communicate that particular transaction. So we can communicate these agreements in a more understandable and approachable way. Second, we would improve our service offerings and relationships with our clients simply because they understand that we would first spend a significant amount of time to find out their problem, and only then we would even go into the solution rather than just telling me like, oh, you want a service agreement, here you go, done, job done, bye bye. And this would also help us to create new products. If you're if any of you are into legal tech, or if you want to create your own services, definitely you need to have a legal design mindset, because if you're creating a tech solution, that means you're trying to solve a problem. And design thinking would help you to legal design will help you understand your problem before you create a solution. And it would also help you to create a culture of innovation in your firm. So let's take a look at an example of how a law might be redesigned. So on this is a on your screen, we are looking at the United Nations Conventions of Contracts for International Sale of Goods. So on the left hand side of your screen, you can see how the normal contract would look. So a very innovative designer called Stefania has created this the redone legislation on the right side, where she's visualized certain key provisions of the law, so that me as a person who is not able to understand the law, but as a person who is a businessman, can take a look at that and understand what is happening here. And next we will take a look at how you can create a better map or a roadmap for your clients. So typically your client asks us, how is my case going to go? What is going to happen? And we tell them, first we would do this, second we would do this, but instead we could tell them how, in a very pictorial representation, we could tell them how an eviction process could work. This is an example. And this really creates a lot of trust between you and your client. And I think that is very important for a lawyer, because your client will definitely come back to you if he's going to trust you. So next, this is an example of a confidentiality of an NDA basically. And this NDA has been created by Anna. And as you can see, it's brilliant. I mean, me as a person who is not a legal, if you're assuming as a person that you're from not a legal background, taking a few minutes to read this agreement is much simpler than reading a 5-10 page agreement, typically. So this is where legal design can also be very useful. Then let's take a look at how litigating.
Yeah, Aditya,
please.
Yeah. So from a design theory perspective, so this agreement that's being shown on the screen first visually draws our attention immediately. And as the code that we saw initially, what Don Norman said, we believe whatever looks good works good, right? That is a fundamental belief in which we all operate with. So when I, as a business owner, get to see something like this, first of all, it is attractive for me. So it draws my attention and pulls me in to see this, immediately, and not actually postpone, thinking that it might time and I'll do this tomorrow. That never comes, right? Number one. Number two, what it does, it kind of distills down entire information into certain small chunks that I can easily consume. Say there is a summary, there are key terms right on the right top, and then who are the two parties, what is the confidential information, what is allowed, what is not allowed. So when you actually piecemeal the information into smaller chunks, it gets very easy for us to observe. And by applying certain design visual design principles, we'll be able to break down this information into smaller chunks. So that is what is happening in the screen. If that helps understanding this. Yeah.
Okay, that was great. I mean, you explained it in ways that I could not as a designer. So this is why you need to collaborate people. It makes a lot of sense to work with designers. Anyway, how can a litigating lawyer use legal design? So as you must all know, like typically courts expect us to file, or at least it's best practice to file your written arguments. And typically your written arguments are a very long document. And just being frank here, it is our judges are dealing with hundreds of cases in a day. It is not reasonable to expect them to sit down and really read every matter. Put yourselves in the shoes of the judge, and what if you could communicate your client's case in a simple manner, in a way that is easy for the judge to understand? Instead of, when you're talking about a complex litigation which has 20 plus parties who are interrelated, you can give a clean flowchart where you can show why this party is related. You can give a timeline of how the case has evolved and what are the matters that are pending, what are your key arguments, and this would really help you. And another thing, definitely arbitrators and mediators apply legal design thinking without even knowing it, because their whole job is to empathize with both the parties and figure out a solution that is agreeable to both of them. And that is legal design, right? And next, we'll take a look at why businesses should care about legal design. So I'll just give two examples here. One example being Netflix. So Netflix has an internal podcast where they talk about um, basically all their teams, and the GC, the General Counsel of Netflix, came onto the talk and talked about how they do things differently in Netflix. And one of the first things that they did, as when they joined the team, was to redo their employment agreement. Now, what did they do? They took a 20-page employment agreement and they made it into like a 2-page employment agreement. Now, why is this relevant for a business? Because as a business, typically when you send across a contract to someone, that is the first touch point they have with your business. And when you send out, and when a company that is like Netflix, which prides itself on having a culture of very laid back culture, having a 20-page agreement will not fit in with that culture. And this creates agreements, this helped Netflix to create an agreement that was very easy to understand. It helped them reduce the negotiation time with prospective employees. It created an impact about the culture of the company with an employee even before he joined the company formally. It also, creating agreements with in such a mindset allows you to be preventive of any dispute, because if both the parties understand truly what is their responsibilities as per the contract, it would prevent any dispute in future. And it also creates trust between both the parties. And when you design compliance documents, if you're working in a fintech company, you would have a lot of RBI compliance to do. And the person who is in charge of the compliance may not be a lawyer, or the end person who has to do that may not be a lawyer. But if the document is designed in such a way that even this end user is able to understand what the compliance is about, it would help the company avoid any regulatory fine later in the day, because the compliance is done by the person who is understanding it. So I think now I'm going to hand it over to Harish, who's going to talk about how we went through the process of redoing the master service agreement for Frozen Iris into something that is approachable and, from a business perspective, how it is better for him. And please take it away.
Thank you. Yeah. So there is one thing that really stands out, in the advantages that is shown on the screen, that is making it preventive rather than defensive. So I have been using, this NDA, master service agreement, employment contract for say like for 4 or 5 years now. But throughout this entire timeline, one mindset that I consistently followed was, these are, set of formality documents. The word that we use colloquially also is like, these are formalities. Can we get this off quick? Can we get this done quickly? Right? So the mindset behind this was, these are set of documents that is going to come and defend, either parties in case something goes wrong, right? But the fundamental thought of making the same set of documents preventive rather than defensive. Why should legal only help you in defense? Why can't it help you in, getting into, a mishap, or not leading to a mishap? Can it educate both the parties enough so that, no one leads to a track that leads to, anything bad? So making it preventive rather than defensive is something that struck me from day one, and that's something we wanted to try. So we have 6 minutes left. I'll quickly walk through what is it that we got to do. So first step, empathizing. Me being the user myself, it was a little easy for us to drill down the problem statement as the first step in understanding what exactly is the problems we are tracking. Number one, increased closure period. We send off the agreement. By the time we close, it'll be a month or it'll be 1.5 months. It would be very tiring. Number two, increased iteration. The client suggests an iteration, then we do it, we give it to Aditya, then he comes up with changes, then we again send it out, the iterations. Then number three, it was difficult for me, being a designer, to interpret the complex language that lawyers used to come up with. It goes on both the sides. Number four, lack of understanding of the process. Say we do a design, creative solution for any of the project. One process may or may not be similar to the other process. So it is very essential for us to communicate to the client on what lies on their plate, what lies on our plate, what we will do, what we will not do. Right? So the first step, we distilled down to this four problem statement that we want to tackle. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the original master service agreement that we had. That is 14 pages. As soon as we send it over a mail, the first thought that comes to a client was, okay, I'll review it tomorrow. Right? and then the next day I'll review it tomorrow, and then a week goes, a month goes. People take a lot of time to revert on this, primarily because it creates a sense of fear. The visual itself demands a lot of time for me, a lot of concentrated time of me to go and review this. And then the thought of reviewing this demands a lot of, I need to be in that mental peace for me to review this, or I need to send it to a different department. I don't know how well they will be able to review, or I need to send to a lawyer where every iteration costs. So first one, we realized it was 14 pages, and it easily took a minimum of 18 minutes for someone to go through it. That is number one. What we got to do after a month-long process is we reduced it down to 9.5 pages. Why am I calling 9.5 pages? Primarily because the first page is going for the stamp paper, right? And in this, we were able to reduce down the complexity of the agreement from 14 pages to 10 pages, and the reading time kind of, reduced by half from 18 minutes, and people are able to consume this in 9 minutes itself, right? So I'm not sure how many of you people are in laptop to actually see this. A quick view of what we actually got to do. So the number one challenge that we want to tackle was what exactly is the process we want to follow in a design process, and what belongs on whose side. So we put out a flowchart on what belongs to whom. The left side you see frozen iris, the right side you see client. And this flowchart right on the page 2 gives a very good clarity for the client in understanding what exactly is the arrangement that they are getting into. What is it that they'll be required to do? What is it that we will do, and at what stage, right? So, visualizing this entire process on a legal document is something that is very new for us personally and for Aditya, including on our clients. But for sure, implementing this, it created a moment of delight, and it created a moment of happiness even for the client, because it created a lot of trust, it created a lot of transparency, a lot of openness, right? I'll show you an example, a comparison between how we got to this. On the left side, you see, a theoretical approach on what is client responsibility and what they need to provide. On the right side, you see a new visual that we have come up with. The title is obligation for frozen iris, for client, something that I will do, something that you will be expected to do, something that both of us will be expected to do, right? So these are certain, visual design patterns where, we applied this information in a certain way for better community. This is something that is, my personal favorite, I would say, primarily because how to give feedback, or how to give approval, or how can the client disapprove something that we come up with. That is something very essential. So something that you see on the left, it definitely takes good 10-15 minutes to go through it and understand, while a simple flowchart on the right, what it does, it distills down the information to its core, abstract, and visualizes it. So you approve. After you approve, it is done. Anything that you do after approval is called a post-approval change. On the other side, there is a disapproval. If you disapprove, it has two things: a general change or a substantive change, and it leads to a certain clause. So it kind of distills down the entire approach to two simple factors. And this is one, a very, very critical topic, that is terms for termination, the validity of the agreement, or how to terminate. So there are certain reasons, certain conditions in which both the parties can terminate without any clause, certain conditions in which both the parties terminate with a certain fine or with a certain clause attached to it, and what happens post termination. Again, a theoretical approach needs a lot of time to go through and interpret it, while a visual approach on the right side, points out what exactly are the steps that you need to go through, and what are the different cases that you can cancel this, right? So this process has been very special and very new, and something that worked out for us big time. 3 tips that we really want to share with you. We are on the 6 o'clock. We would like to have closed it 10 minutes prior. Sorry for it. 3 tips that we want to really give you from the exercise that we went through. First, the entire set of legal documents are in a very complex language. For a common man, it's very difficult to understand, right? So what from my discussion with Aditya, what I realized is the law says until and unless whatever we agree upon is objective, it is valid. It doesn't demand a complex language at all. So first one, use plain language. You can use simple sentences to convey complex information. It is challenging for sure, but it is doable. By virtue of practicing law for 5-10 years, it is definitely difficult for all lawyers to come up with simple sentences for sure. But it is definitely worthwhile investment, say hiring a content writer, or giving the content to someone else, or learning yourself to come up in a plain language. Number 2, information design. Try to interpret the information into smaller chunks. make it easier to find key terms, make sure the document flows as a story from point A to point B. So even if you see here, the way that we had structured our document is it starts with SOW, then it goes to the agreement, then we talk about payments, then we talk about the team, then we talk about the material, then we talk about changes. So the flowchart that we established on the first page is how the entire document itself has been structured. So this gives a very storytelling narrative for the audience to go through. This is number two. Number three, use visuals. Can you put it out visually? By virtue of being humans, we hold visual 60% more than text, right? Provide a simple unifying message for what it is to come. Visuals and icons. Some usage of icons or even emojis or some visual patterns, if you can bring in, that will really help declutter the information and absorb it easily, right? We would like to talk more about this, but since we are reaching time, so I covered the process. First we defined, then we came up with a lot of ideas which we did not show here. Then we prototype the solution, and what we showed you here is the final product that we have, right? There's one thing that we missed in this. The loyal audience over here, they would like to hear what is the step that we missed in this, which is very important in design thinking. Can we have Q&As? Can people comment or put out a notice? What do you think is the step that we missed?
Yeah, sure, guys. All of you are welcome to, put your answers in the chat.
Why am I not able to see the Q&A? Do we have answers coming in?
Yeah, we have answers coming in the chat, but I don't think people are close to what we are looking at.
Okay, guys, not
Yeah,
that.
there's one person.
Something else. There is one another step that's missing in this that we did not talk about. Do we have the answer in the chat box?
Yeah, I remember seeing two individuals. So yeah, guys, this was really interesting and extremely enriching.
So one step that we missed out in this is testing it with our audience. So the prototype that we had, we took it to our audience, who is our clients, real clients. We showed it to them and asked them, how do you feel about it? Do you think this works? So a couple of challenges that we faced, couple of positive and negative reaction that we observed, and we clubbed all the FAQs that they had into 4 questions. Try to categorize it as less as possible, and put out these 4 questions as an FAQ document. So one question that all clients faced was, this document looks very different than anything else. Is it even valid? Can I even take it to court? That is a very valid argument. Considering everyone will understand legal design, it's already looking nice, it's looking great, I don't need to explain anything. If it have already given it out, then maybe no one would have signed it, right? And hence the important step of testing it with your real audience makes a lot of sense. We showed it to all our clients, 6, 7, 8 people, I guess, and everyone came up with this question. Then we picked the most important question to address, put it as an FAQ document, attached it as a separate document to the MSA and sent it. And within 1 week, we started actually seeing real closures. And that is the magic or the innovation that design thinking process creates. And we believe that is going to be the simpler law, or the way to create simpler law for the future of businesses. And this is with specific to contract design that we are talking. And this process can be scaled to service design, organization design, blah, in solving any bigger challenges, right? Thank you so much for the time, Team Lawctopus. It was so nice of you to bring this out. So me and Aditya are trying to open source this MSA and NDA and few more things that we are working on. And we are trying to put this up as a service where we are also working with certain clients in helping them with legal things. It is in a nascent stage, but we would like to hear more opinions on it. We are sharing some parts of the deck along with the MSA, maybe in few weeks time, once we get to do more testing in our website. So if anyone wants to contact us, feel free. If you have any opinions, any Q&A, happy to answer it. Thank you. Sorry for the delay.
No worries, guys. I think we can just take a few more questions. A lot of our attendees have been, waiting for their questions to get answered, because, and I think most of them also have been answered through the course of your presentation, the early questions that were brought up. One question that was highlighted a lot of times is there any repository as such if I want to learn more about this space? Obviously, my attendees are going to contact the panelists. But other than that, what right now where do we stand? Are there any courses on this, and what skills does one need to acquire if they actually want to start practicing and using legal design in general?
I'll take this.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just off the top of my head, there are 2 free books that you can read. One being Typography for Lawyers. It's there online. You just have to look for it on Google. Second would be Legal Design by Margaret Hagan. It's again a free book. It's available online. You can just read about this, these concepts, and figure out how you can take this further and in your own practice.
Another question that's also come up, Aditya and Harish, you also, since you were, at the business and the commercial end of things over here, which is how difficult is it right now to pitch this idea to business owners to get them to not worry about the enforceability of the contract and the legality of it, and the fact that this will actually help them further?
Oh, this is my favorite question. Thank you so much for raising this. See, so whenever we are seeing something new, there is a natural apprehension behind people accepting or showing their reaction to it. That is a default step that we all need to come across or get through. One, there has to be an awareness about it, and even legal design has to mature to a stage in India and also globally, wherein it's being acknowledged officially by all courts or by constitution. But whatever we are trying to do here, it is very much legal and accepted. The first step in helping your clients understand this is through an awareness process. You need to walk them through the advantages of it and how it still meet all the requirements that they need to go through, and also offers them additional value. So when you talk in terms of the value that it derives, that they would be able to derive from this, then definitely people will consider to give it a thought. And once they actually get to see the value, then their ability or their wantness to stick to it will be higher. But the first one is only through talking, through discussion, through awareness, helping them go through this process of why it is advantage for you, why it is advantage for you. I think that would be the answer for it.
Certainly. Also, for all the attendees who are interested in learning more about legal design, Aditya and and Lawctopus is planning a workshop on legal design very soon. It's going to be a closed event where you people will actually learn how to, employ design thinking and the practical application side of things, and how do you also pitch it to your clients. So we'll soon post about it on our website. So stay tuned for that. And this is going to be a very interesting workshop.
Just
Yeah,
wanted
guys.
something here. So, a lot of students are asking, are such creative documents, acceptable in a court? So guys, if you consider a contract, what is a valid contract, right? So a valid contract would have an offer and an acceptance. It would have an intention to create a legal relationship. It would have a lawful consideration, competent parties, free consent, lawful object, right? All of these are contract 101. Now, does this form of an agreement, which is designed through, design principles, does this violate any of this? Not really, right? But some court documents, they might have their own formats, and that is the bane of Indian legal system. Those formats have been going on for centuries, and they don't want to change, because otherwise, how do lawyers earn money? So, the thing is, a lot of these contracts will be acceptable between clients, between clients who are accepting of these documents, and the world is changing for good for that. Some codes, some documents, and Aditya would have a better understanding of that. They might require their own formats, and where such, what some people are calling creative documents, they might not work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would stick to the prescribed format for something like a promissory note, but something that is an individual contract between 2 parties where the risk of that contract being litigated is low. I would think about using something like this. And as Tanuj also said, there is no law that bars pictorial representation or bars. In fact, we can even have contracts which are oral, and even that can be let in as evidence. And in this case, we are having actual written contract. Only thing is that we are not going to use complicated words in all the places, and we're using a few pictures and visual information styles to communicate the information in a better manner.
Right, and the essential element of a contract is not that it should be lengthy or tough to read or boring. That is nowhere in the Indian Contract Act. So
yeah,
yeah, just also some students are asking what sort of things or courses could we do to gain, let's say, a qualification in legal design. Guys, the first thing which I have also learned through this webinar is that legal design is a discipline. It's a process of doing things. It's a way of thinking about things. It's not a qualification that you earn, right? You suddenly don't do a 2-week course and become a legal designer. It's a philosophy. It's a way of doing things. And maybe Harish and Aditya, you could correct me there.
I agree with you. No corrections.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Whatever you say makes sense. It is a practice. It has to evolve over a period of time. As said, design by itself doesn't have an absolute answer towards something. You approach 2 different design forms for the same brief. The output that they both will come up with, will be different. It has to be different. No two, people can think in the exact same way. So this will evolve. It is up to evolution. As said, we are seeing this, in a very much evolved state in Europe and other countries for sure. With the implementation of GDPR, it has been picked up extremely big time over there. And I'm sure that India is not so far away from, getting something like this. And it is necessary and big time for all of us to get started into something like this so that we'll be there by the time it's demanded. Big time. There is one point I want to answer here, Tanuj. A lot of people have asked that doing this visually will this dilute, will it dilute the specificity which the original document has. So doing it visually or doing it through a easy language doesn't mean that we are neglecting or we are removing certain specifics. So legal design is an improvised version of whatever you had in your previous contract, right? So whatever we are approaching in terms of visual, whatever we are approaching in terms of a language, all of this has been tested. And we have had multiple rounds of debate on how can someone interpret this and not interpret this, and the language has been made as specific as possible. But the tonality and the usage of words has been distilled down to a common man language, as simple as that. But no way there is a compromise of that I will bring in some ambiguity over there. This is fine over there. That is fine. No compromises are accepted. Whatever set of pointers we are talking over there, each and everything, if not improvised, will be portrayed over here. The format, the way you communicate, the medium you communicate is what is different. I think that covers a lot of questions that's answered in the chat box.
Yeah, guys. So I believe we have already overshot our time. Okay. And this entire session has been extremely informative for me. Somebody after, 5 years at law school, I'm getting to learn something for the first time, which I feel is completely going to change my perspective towards how I approach my clients' problems henceforth. So this has been extremely enriching. And going forward, for all the attendees, if you want to know more about design thinking, you can always, look up the 2 books that have been mentioned. And we at Lawctopus also will be trying to come up with such for webinars and courses around these topics so that it helps you improve and become the lawyers of tomorrow, and not just lawyers who are supposed to be learning things that are required as of today. And as we see this to be the future of law, let's hope all of us together work towards it and increase awareness on this topic. And final thank you to both our panelists over here, Aditya and Harish, for this excellent presentation, for your time, and for informing us about this amazing discipline that's about to come. Thank you so much. All right, guys, and thank you all the attendees. We'll be sending all the necessary information to you over the follow-up email. So do not worry about that. All the necessary information about how to contact our panelists if they like being contacted will also be shared with you guys. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you, Harish.
Thank you, guys.
Aditya.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Tanuj. Anytime.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.